Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this session that I've been looking very much forward to. I was asked, my name is Hilde Sandvik, and I was asked by the music festival in Bergen if I could curate a couple of conversations. This was not very long after Putin went to war on Ukraine. But it very fast also felt like a very personal war in many ways. And the title came to my mind, Putin's war on Gayrope or Gayropa. Because in many ways, since 2014, there has been a growing notion in Russia that Europe is turning to a Gayrope or a Gayropa. When I was asked when this title came to my mind, I didn't know who to talk with and have a conversation with. Of course, there are lots of liberals in Europe who's been talking about what the concept which we will dive into, Gayropa or Gayrope, actually means and where it comes from. But then first one name came to my mind. And the reason is that I, 10 years back or 12 years back, wrote a book about what is called hersketeknikker in Norwegian, but it's master suppression techniques in English. And when that book came out, I was approached by a Ukrainian woman who asked, is it possible to translate this book into Ukrainian? And of course I said, yeah, but that sounds like a good idea. And then of course I forgot it. She came back 10 years later and said, no, it's possible. And the woman who actually set out to publish this book is here now on the screen, namely Lilia Omelianenko, who is actually the Ukrainian publisher. And Lilia, I first have to say welcome to join in on this conversation. Welcome.
Hello, thank you very much for the invitation. I'm happy to be here with you today.
I'm so happy you could join because I sent a message to you, it was probably in March, and I said I have been thinking about you because, of course, you came to my mind quite fast after the invasion, and I asked where are you, what happened, and where do you live? Are you safe? And you said that you had already fled. So where are you now?
I'm now in Bratislava, and actually on the first day of war, it was the 24th of February, my friend woke up me in the morning at 5 a.m. saying, Lila, the war has started. I think we need to go to a safer place. And I woke up all my family on this day, and I couldn't actually believe that this is really happening, because there were a lot of talks before that, but I was still hoping that in our modern times it's not possible. And I just did not believe. And then I was like, I didn't know where to run, what to take. But I took some really essentials for me and for my family, and we went to Ivano-Frankivsk, which is in western Ukraine. And then we were there for a week, and then I moved to Bratislava, to Slovakia, because I was really scared, because the Russians occupied nuclear plants. Chernobyl plant and Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant, and I was really frustrated. I was afraid that they could do something and there could be some nuclear explosion. So we went to Bratislava, and now I am here for 3 months already.
Yeah, and your husband is back in Ukraine.
He's not allowed to leave Ukraine, because he's a man, and during due to martial law, if I'm not mistaken, he is not allowed to leave the country because he is a man, and all men should stay in the country.
And before we go into today's topic, I have to introduce Alexandra Horosik. I first saw Alexandra at the Rafto House of Human Rights. She was at the breakfast talking about your situation. You're from Belarus, and you were arrested during a demonstration in Belarus. And then you came to Bergen, and you have to tell a little bit about your background and the way before we kind of enter into the topic of today.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I was really happy to meet you, and I'm really happy to speak about this situation and to spread the word. And by this way, at least I can have somehow influence on this situation in Belarus and in the minds of people. So in Belarus, I was studying at the university, and then 2020 and appeared, and it was elections, one more elections when the Lukashenko won, and I went to the streets, went to protests many times, and then I was doing a lot of works for human rights defending in Belarus, and I was almost expelled from my university for my activism, and then I tried to find some more safe place where people are not judged for their activism or their thoughts. And don't get to prison for that. So I have found the program of Norway, Student at Risk. This is the way how I appeared in Bergen and in Norway, and now I'm studying in the University of Bergen.
And what I didn't know when I first asked both of you is how important how important this topic of today is in different ways. And Lilia, you can share perhaps a little bit of your experience as a publisher. And I mean, when you ended up by publishing the book about master suppression techniques, which I now got a copy of, it's in Ukrainian language, and it's part of your feministic work as a publisher as well. But you can say a little bit about that, and then we can talk about what the notion Gayrope actually is and how that suddenly has become a kind of a political discourse in this big war.
I'm very happy that you have a Ukrainian version of the book. It's really exciting. And I'm very happy that the book has been finally published in Ukraine. Unfortunately, it was published right before the war, maybe 1 month before the war. So we did not have enough time to popularize it. But I should say that this book is extremely important for Ukrainian women, because I would say that feminist movement became much more active in the last 6 years after the Orange Revolution, because we have a long history of feminism in Ukraine, but it has never been so active and so understandable, I would say, because before that, many people were afraid of the word feminism, and they were thinking that it is something dangerous, and that women will not love men, and men will be on the second place. They just could not understand it, and still there is some misunderstanding, but it becomes better and better. And your book really helps women to understand what rights they have, especially at work. And I would say that many women, especially in small cities, they don't understand what is abusement. I mean, they don't understand when they are abused, and this is not something that should happen to them. They got used that it's okay because man is the main figure in the family, and there should be a lot of education among women to tell them that it's not correct. You have your rights. You have you can do. I mean, you can choose whatever job you want, and you should not be discriminated at your workplace. You should not be discriminated neither in terms of salary, neither in terms of position in the company. And it is very important because your techniques that you are describing in the book, they are unfortunately they are quite widespread in Ukraine so far. When Olga Shamshur contacted me and said that she wanted that this book is published in Ukraine, she said that in Norway everyone knows this book, and which means that everyone understands when there is a manipulation and where there is not. And Ukraine stays far, how to say it, we are like 10 or maybe 20 years before you in understanding of these things. That's why for me it was very important to publish it, because we are pioneers in among publishing house in feminism.
Yeah, and that was
sphere.
And that was because, I mean, this is just one example, but what has happened during the last years, and especially after the color revolutions, then you could see that the concept of feminism, LGBT rights became almost as a weapon and used as a weapon. I've seen, for instance, what happened on Maidan after 2014 described as a kind of a gayish thing. And then you could see how that was used also in the propaganda more and more.
Yes, that's right, but it's a very wide question. Like, you know, after Orange Revolution, women became more, how to say, weightful in the society, and they now understand they have their own companies. There are a lot of IT workers in IT sphere, because before that IT sphere was considered like only for men, and even still it is considered for men, but now more and more women are working in it. Also during the wartime we have more and more women who are participating in the war, and it was not like it was not that popular before. Moreover, I would tell you that until 3 years ago, we had a law where there were around 400 professions which were forbidden for women. Can you imagine?
400.
Yeah, 400. So and it was like considered professions in heavy industry, for example, or if you're a driver of a subway. In a subway, it was not allowed for a woman to be a driver in a subway. Can you imagine? And only 3 years ago, this law was cancelled, because actually it was firstly accepted during Soviet times, and still it was active. You know, it's like a nonsense. But now everything changed a lot, and women have absolutely the same rights, even as I said, during the war time. They help a lot, they shoot, they fly, and etc. I'm now trying to understand how to connect it to LGBT and to.
And you can talk
free.
about your own work in it, because you have, your work has been mainly or you have been working on both feminism and LGBT rights, and you can tell about the same movement happening in the Ukrainian, in Ukraine.
Yes, actually, we were the first publishers, and are still the first publishers in Ukraine, who talked about same-sex families in children literature. And our book, which was published 5 years ago, which is called Maya and Her Moms, it was a scandal on the whole territory of Ukraine, because there is a book by Larissa Denisenko who talks about 17 types of families, including same-sex family. And we got threats from far-right parties and from religious organizations not to make a presentation of this book at the book fair in Lviv. Our author got threats for life for this book. But our Ukrainian society appeared to be more tolerant than I could expect. And they started to struggle and saying positive things towards our book. Even state bodies, representatives of state bodies, ministers, started to support us. And there was no single blogger who did not talk about this book. It's like the book was everywhere. And this was a very important thing for the whole Ukrainian society, because this was like a bomb that exploded. And people could not, before that, they could not imagine that this thing could happen, and we can talk with children about same-sex families. But after that, they started to become more tolerant to this topic. Why? Because if you are talking a lot about some hot social topic, people who are not tolerant, they get used to it, and they start to understand, okay, let them be. Okay, I will not tell anything. Okay, maybe I'm not supporting it, but at least I'm not saying anything to the contrary. So let them live as they want. Because the more we talk about some problems in society, the easier to solve them for the society itself. And that's why this is our core focus of our publishing house, to choose these painful spots of society and push on them, push until society becomes more reluctant to it and get used to it.
Before I go to Alexandra and ask her about how the situation is for women's rights and LGBT rights in Belarus, I want you to, try to explain how you look upon the word Gayrope and Putin's war on Gayrope, because I know that you've been thinking a lot about it as well. And where does it come from, and how did it develop?
Actually, I was making a small poll before this conversation with my friends, because this is a very interesting topic, and there is absolutely different side of the story, actually, which we did not discuss with you before. And one of the things why what is Gayrope for Russia or for Putin, it has some deep roots. And one of the roots is that, Soviet people, free Soviet people, liberal Soviet people, they were oppressed all the times. They were in prison, and there are a lot of people who were in prison. And if you are thinking of Soviet society, maybe 1/4 of, so it's like 25% of people could sit in prison for some period of time, and gays were considered as a part of this prison culture. And it was not considered like romantic relations between men and men or women and women. It was rather considered like a sign of power of one person under another person, because it goes from prison times. And which means that the person who was abused in prisons by other men, for example, a man who was abused by other men in prison, he is like in the lower layer of society. And when Putin or Russians say Gayrope, they want to show that Europe is a lower layer of the society. Do you understand what I mean? And this is one part of the story. And the other part of the story is that Russia will never allow free people to exist, because this is a threat to dictatorship regime. And this goes as to LGBT people, and the same goes to women who want to be first and who are not supporters of so-called traditional society. Because if one person stands out, it means that there will be others who will follow them. And then the society will not be how to say it, Alexandra, help me, послушный, obedient, yeah? The mob which dictator has, it will not be obedient anymore. And that's why it's a threat for them. So as I see, there are two sides of these stories. It's some historical past from prisons and attitude to people from prison, and the other side is they don't want free people to exist and to be leaders of opinion leaders to some extent.
But it's also this notion that Europe is weak. We are feminized, and we are woke, and we cancel, and we are weak, simply weak. Do you recognize that, Alexandra, from Belarus?
Well, I think yes, I have seen something common in Belarus, and like the attitude to gays or lesbians. And for example, I also asked my friends and some activists to give me some references for the situation in Belarus. So they showed me pictures of demonstrations where in 2020, when the LGBT community was represented around demonstrators in Minsk. So they were using flags and different symbols of their position, and they wanted to be heard, as well as everyone wanted to be heard in Belarus. So, but they also met some critique from people who are around them. Like they were demonstrating with those people against Lukashenko, against the regime, against this propaganda. But even from the society, they had this kind of critique, like, what are you doing? Like, we don't want to have it here. Like, you're trying to change the values or something like this. We don't need these European rights here, and like, what are you doing here? And like, these questions were around these people who were demonstrating.
How is, I mean, this division between, I saw recently numbers from research in Russia before the war on how many Russians, for instance, consider themselves as to be part of Europe. That was a very, very low percentage who said that we are part of Europe. And also at the same time talking about Europe also as kind of this week, Gayrope has after 2014 been very a main part of the way Russians talk about Europe. How does that look in Ukraine, Lydia?
I mean, you mean how many people are considered that a European country? That Ukraine is a European country? Is it your question? Did I understand it correctly? Actually, I would say that maybe around 90% of Ukrainians consider themselves as being in Europe, and actually we'd never have a thought actually that we are not a European country. We always knew that yes, we are a part of Europe, and in many senses I mean I would say that we have much more common with Europeans that with Western European countries, than with Russia. We are really very different, because this is a Russian propaganda which is trying to say that Ukrainians, Belarusians, and Russians, they are all the same, and the languages are the same. This is totally not true. Absolutely. I mean, even in terms of language, I'm now in Slovakia. Even if I did not learn anything in Slovakian language, I still understand about 40% of what Slovakian people say. The same, I absolutely understand what people, the language, Belarusian language, Polish language. These languages are much more closer than Ukrainian, for example, and Russian. This is, I would say, many years propaganda of Russia that we are one nation. No, we are not one nation at all. We are much more Europeans than anyone would think, if there are still people who think that we are not European.
I don't think so these days. Alexandra, I just, because when we sat down to talk about this topic, and we talked about how it is for the fight for women's rights and also LGBT rights in Belarus. And you've already told stories about how hard it has been during the demonstrations. But then you also brought up a personal story. Do you want to share that?
Oh, yes, I can share it. It's kind of really personal, but I think it's really important to share our stories. And it's like we can read a lot of stories around books or see some interviews, and I think personal stories exist everywhere, and I don't think that I can hide it or something like this, and I can meet any critique, or I'm ready for this. So my father, actually, he died around 6 years ago. He convinced suicide, but after his death, my mother started talking about him in another way. Like, he was not that bad person. He was we actually had a lot of good memories with him. But once she also told that he was bisexual, and after that, I tried to understand him in to make more attention for his behavior, that he was his actions around in family that he was doing, and I thought okay, so I think now it's something more important to explore and to read, to observe, because it's really connected with us, and sometimes we even don't know how close it could be. And so I think he, like the whole of his life, he was hiding himself. And like I have found sometimes like game porn video disc or disc, you know, disc around some movies, and I was like, what?
Where is this?
What? Why is it in this place? But then I'm like, okay, well, let it be. Maybe something, I don't know what was the reason, but okay. But then when my mother told me these facts, and I was like, okay, now I understand why it was these strange things around, and why I couldn't just understand him absolutely, because I don't know, he was really strange in his life. He was trying to make art. He was really artist. He also was actually imprisoned. So I think it's also could influence on him somehow when it was I don't know, 20 years ago. So it's 90 years and the fall of Soviet Union, and like the corruption and everything around, and absolutely unstable situation. So yes.
But you also said something about how he reacted on talking about gay people, for instance.
Oh yeah, of course. This is it's homophobia, I think it's called, when you treat others like, when he was treating gays in a bad way. So that it is bad, like, oh, I hate them, and then blah blah blah. But actually he was himself doing these things. So yeah, this is what is, I don't know, they are trying to hide themselves and to treat and it's yeah.
And then, of course, I wonder, when now the word Gayrope is used so much in Russian media as well about Europe, then I wonder how the fight for the rights of people like your dad, for instance, will be looked upon, if it will be harder, or if something will happen to it. What do you think, Lilia?
Actually, I would say that, for example, in Ukraine, the situation with attitude to gay people was much worse even 6 years ago. And if we look at the story of prides in Ukraine, the first pride, I think, was about 5 or 6 years ago, and it did not happen because there were so many threats from so-called traditional people and from religious organizations, that our police said, sorry, we don't see that we will be able to defend you, actually. But the next year it happened. There was a crowd of police. There were some aggressive people going around, and there were attacks on people who were on this pride. The next year, there were less police, there were less aggressive people, and this was like for these 5 or 6 years, every pride was going easier and easier and easier. And at the moment, we see that attitude to gays changed really a lot. And there are a lot of supporters, and despite the fact that there might be some attacks on gay people on streets, overall, I would say that our society became much more tolerant by these days. And what I also wanted to say, that when we heard about attacks on LGBT, some of the organizations were sponsored by Russians. And there is because there were some attacks at the center of Kiev for on girls who wear colored hair. And there are some aggressive guys came to them and say, why are you wearing colored hair? And they started to beat them, actually. And then there was a research who was standing behind this. And they found that the organizers of these attacks was one of the persons who was supporting invasion of Russia to Donbass. And one of the person who actually lives there and was supporting all these actions. So, but what is interesting, actually, chauvinism in Ukraine is very, very has very, very low percentage. And there are not so-called many nationalists as Russia says about us. It's more Russian propaganda saying that we have a lot of nationalists in Ukraine than it really is. We don't have nationalists in any ruling, I would say, not in the parliament, not in the party, because it's less
2%,
than
something like
2%. It's 2%. But if you look at foreign media talking about situation in Ukraine and talking, for example, about Azov, who were defending Mariupol, as you know, everybody is talking about these organizations as nationalists. But it's not true, because it's a Russian propaganda which says much more about this, because they are interested to show Ukraine as an aggressive country who is fighting for some strange values.
Do you recognize the story that Alexandra just shared with us now? Do you recognize that kind of story that she shared?
Yes, this is very. I was listening to Alexandra, and for me, it's my condolences with the death of your father, and that he could not accept himself, and he was not allowed to accept himself. And I was thinking that this is so widespread story when the person is bisexual or gay, but he is trying to show that he is not, and he is trying to show his hate to other copies of himself. But it really was happening a lot during Soviet times, and there are still people in Ukraine who are the same, who are like, they are how to say, they want to show that they are supporting these nationalistic organizations, and that they want to attack these all gay organizations. But in fact, then it appears that they are gays themselves. I could never understand this, because I am tolerant people. I don't understand the need of this of hiding this. But I think this goes from childhood and from the acceptance of such people in the society, and now they're trying to defend themselves by this way.
How would it have been for your dad today, you think? Now, just some years after, has anything changed in Belarus, or is it getting harder?
Oh, I think the situation will be the same for him in Belarus, because it becomes even harder, and it's like all of the oppositions or any kind of different views are persecuted, and that's why it's even harder to find even some ears to speak with, because it's now the people need just to keep it even deeper in themselves, and not to show it. And yeah, but I also think about like the well, I was when I was trying to prepare for the discussion, because I think it's really important to think about the history and the previous times, because it's a lot connected with the culture and cultural things. And okay, I was not been living in the Soviet Union, but I can explore and I can see the information from that time and people talking about the Soviet Union and the stuff. But I have found that in some videos that in the Soviet Union there was like they were not speaking about sex almost, and it's like gays or lesbians were not existed. It's like only somehow traditional families and working for the party and the communist ideas. So this was like the life of the society. But then the Soviet Union fell out, and it's like, okay, so there is something we need to do. And some countries were like maybe, okay, there is Europe, okay, there is some other things around us, and we are not like rooted in the communism. Maybe it's time for freedom and to speak about ourselves and about things. And I think on that time appeared some speaks, or I don't know, people decided to speak themselves in a way of that they are lesbians or they are gays, but still there are some ideologies or politicians that Putin is imperialistic, and this imperialism came from it's also was supported by communism. So he is doing his imperialistic things, and he is the representative of the KGB, this. So he's the representative of this system that they use it still. So it's from the communism and by this way and by this time. And so when the fall of the communism was represented around, like in some way, but it still exists. And he decided, I think that the authorities decided to treat this kind of these values and this freedom in it's something bad. So they trying to destroy our system. It's something new. We don't need it, and like it was working in this way. So I think that, and then it's to come to Ukraine. So Putin was also using this. He supports the organizations or far right movements, for example, in Ukraine, to show that there is something unstable, because he wants to show that in Europe there is instability in some way. So gays and these parrots are showing that.
There is something weak and decaying.
Yes, yeah. And he wants just to see that the community itself, it treats the gays or this far right movements, so to show that there is instability in it, so that we are better, that we have this kind of good life around us, and
and it's also connected to family values, of course. The traditional family values.
But if I may say, actually, these traditional values, this is some kind of absurd and not real thing. Because, okay, you would think, what is traditional family 100 years ago in Russia, in Ukraine, I don't know. It's a family where woman doesn't have any rights at all. She is cleaning, she is giving birth to children, she is preparing food, she's staying home all of the time, and there is a man in the family, and when he doesn't like something, what is he doing? He beats his wife. Is this a traditional family we are looking at? I mean, I don't understand what sense they try to put in the phrase traditional family. There is no traditional family, and even in these times were absolutely different families. Absolutely, there were no one example of a good family which everyone should look at. So it's some kind of, mystical phrase which everyone, I mean, far-right parties and religious organizations are using and trying to form some, I don't know, saying that this is an example that everyone should follow. It doesn't exist actually. Or even if it exists, it is very strange, and we would never want to have such an example during modern times.
But what do you think is? I mean, what can we do these times? I mean, it's if we think that there are some values to defend, if we think that there is a modern way of living. If we strongly believe in freedom for all, and as one of you activists you sent me a beautiful film, a horrible film to watch even about some LGBT activists who were really severely beaten and arrested during demonstrations, and one of them said, I don't want to be an activist, I want to live. But where do you see the path forward? I mean, Ukraine is in a horrible war right now, but if this also is a war on values, what do you think, Vililia?
It is a war on values, but unfortunately, this war has not appeared just now. You know, Russia was trying to take territories around her for many, many years. And as we joke now that on the 24th of February, the war started, which actually began 400 years ago. And in my opinion, the only possible way to feel free and that Europe is free and doesn't feel any threat from Russia, because actually Russia now is the main threat on the earth, as I see. The only way is that Russia becomes not one country, but it breaks into small countries, small regions, which will not be able to gather power to go to Europe. And they will not have, in this case, they will not have their voice. They just will not have enough resources for this. It's the only way I see for us to become free these days. Otherwise, there always will be threat, because Putin is just one small puzzle in all this story. You know that now when you see the polls, the Russian polls, about 75% support Putin in his war to Ukraine, which means that propaganda has eaten all their brain. Absolutely, of all these people. And no matter whether it is Putin or there will be another person after him, at some point they will start conquering and trying to conquer other countries, just because this is their way of living. This is you know why they also have this war? Because people in Russia, they live very, very poorly. Their villages are extremely poor. They don't have normal toilets, because when they come to Ukraine and they see, oh my God, how it will be in English, unitas.
The toilet itself.
The toilet itself, I mean the toilet. They steal it. Can you imagine? There are toilets on the tanks going back to Russia. Why do you think? Washing machines, clothes. Why? Because Russia is very poor, and Putin is not able to feel his people. I mean, to live good. And that's why he needs to attract attention and say that there is some threat around Russia and they need to defend. And then the attention of people is not on their poverty, but on war, and that they need to defend their country. But nobody is actually threatening them. It's a myth.
What do you think? What do you see, Alexandra?
Well, I think that Putinism is something that was working for 20 or more years already, and as faster as we, I don't know, as faster as he will get out from the place, the faster changes will be. But even after his I don't know, when he went out, so the risk will be the consequences that we'll be working with, and it's like the Putinism will be existing, because it's not only Putin, it's
a
like,
system.
Yes, it's the system, and he is like one, just like, okay, I can be that figure to meet any critique and everything for me, but he is supported by this I don't know, 1,000 people who are or 2,000 people who are represents his the power in Russia. So he's around them, and that's the only people who has their power. But the other people in Russia, they are just under big pressure, and I think that's also he tries to, they are trying to maybe to build their empire once again, but they also fight with the minorities, and because the Russia is really huge, just like you can take a look at the map and just amaze yourself with the size of it and how many cultures are represented there. And I also thought that some cultures who are really in poor and like in close to China or somewhere around there. So these cultures are really poor, and some of these representatives are also sent to Ukraine to engage in war. And I think that this is how he also tried to just to say them goodbye, and we need your place and everything. And he also spread the language and everything. So it's like, I want to have a big, huge Russian-speaking people. I don't want to have another diversity or any cultures around. So it's like, I think this is their goal.
But you know what the bad thing is, that he's talking that he's saving the life of Russian-speaking people. Do you know that all cities that were bombed and just destroyed absolutely, like Mariupol, like Kharkiv, I mean, part of Kharkiv was destroyed, Kharkov, part of Chernigiv, part of Sumy. All these cities, they're quite close to Russia, and there are mostly Russian-speaking people. So he is killing Russian-speaking people, mostly. And I would also say that there is no real opposition in Russia. Even Navalny, we actually in Ukraine, we don't think that Navalny can change something. And there is one thing which can show this. Once Navalny was asked a question, whose part is Crimea? And he said, Crimea is Russian, because Crimea is not a sandwich which we need to pass from one country to another. So I mean, it's like it shows a lot.
Navalny was also accused of being gay, I remember, and to have support from the gay opposition. So he was part of this kind of Gayrope that was a war on. But I just finally...
But nevertheless, he is not different from Putin. He is not different.
I just want to ask this last question. The next book you will launch in Ukraine, what is it about? The next book you will launch in Ukraine?
A short story of Ukrainian feminism. This is a comic book which we are now finalizing, and it will be extremely interesting book. And Alexandra, there will be even Lukashenko in this book because it's a funny book, and it's the story of whole Ukrainian feminism, how it started and who were the main figures, but it's made with humor. And we also included current story in Ukraine.
Will you read it, Alexandra?
Of course. Even with humor, I think everything gets better, and we need to be optimistic and survive with this.
Do you think that the story about your dad will influence what you will be doing in the years to come and how you think about things?
Oh yes, I think it's a good story, and I'm trying to learn more about human behavior and psychology and how things influence on us, and how like our past and childhood and traumas and different things. So to understand people more and to understand this situation and to be more open to people and to understand them and their behavior. Yeah.
Do you think you will go back to Belarus?
Well, when Lukashenko will go away, of course I can go back, but I want to learn to explore more the world now, because I don't have any. My family moved to Poland, mother and brother, so I don't have there. I have there only my granny, and now I can live for myself more, to develop myself more, and then to use my knowledge in Belarus for the better life there.
Thank you so much, both of you. It's so both interesting and, of course, frightening stories that you tell, but also with hope. And that was the main point in the video that you shared with me, Alexandra, that you want to live, we all want to live and love. So thank you so much, and good luck with everything, I have to say. It seems almost a little bit banal to use such words as luck these days. But it's I have to admit that I admire your courage. I have to say.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for invitation, and we believe in Ukrainian army.
Слава Україні!
Героям слава!
Thank you.
Thank you.